Great. So thanks everybody for joining us. I think just a quick intro, if we did want to do a quick round table to introduce everybody and our panelists today. We're going to be speaking about appraisal modernization, essentially all of the strains that our industry is currently facing, what some of the solutions are that are being proposed to, support these issues. The good ones, the bad ones, what do we need to be aware of? What are the things we should be excited about? What we should be concerned about? And, anything that has to do with our future here. So we're really excited about Craig, Brian, and Dustin, who are able to join us, who we think bring some really great perspectives, very different perspectives on this topic. So excited about engaging conversation here. If we want to go around, we can start with the class team and quick introductions.
Sure, I'll start us off. I'm Scott Rose. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer here at Class.
Cool. John Dingeman, Chief Appraiser here at Class.
Jameis Bertil, the Director of Operations.
Awesome. And I'm Nick Butterfield. I'm the Director of Marketing here as well. And then our three panelists today, if we want to start with Dustin.
Hi, Dustin Harris, the Appraiser Coach.
Cool. And Brian?
Brian Melsheimer. I'm an appraiser out in Northern California. I'm the Vice President of the Real Estate Appraisers Association in the Sacramento area.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. And last but not least, Craig.
Hi, I'm Craig Morley. I'm an appraiser in Southern Utah. We appraise in Utah, Arizona, and Nevada. And I've been the past president of the National Association of Appraisers and currently serving on the Appraisal Standards Board with the Appraisal Foundation.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you again. Thanks, gentlemen, for joining us today. So again, what we're going to be going through, we're going to start talking through some of the growing appraiser capacity strains. Obviously we felt a lot of big strains this year, this past year with COVID, but the more we're looking into this research, this definitely isn't a short-term issue. This is something that's going to continue. And so something that I think we should talk about. We'll look through some solutions as I suggested. Some of these might be as basic as just, AVMs, the different COVID flexibilities, or, what are some of the different hybrid and more innovative options that are coming to market. We are excited to chat with you today about class valuation solution and what we're working on. I know many of you on this call have already kind of had some sneak peeks as we're starting to get this rolled out here. And really what this is all kind of boiling down to for us, in our opinion, is appraiser independence and protecting and empowering everybody's independence as an appraiser. And so we're going to spend some time at the end talking about that as well, and kind of what all of these different innovations mean for our independence. So for starters, the current market strains. And John, if you want to take it from here.
So Brian, as a leader in your state organization, I'm sure you get feedback from appraisers, but we all have on just the capacity strain that appraisers in general across the country have. And earlier in the year, Freddie Mac, they published an article called "The Impact of COVID-19 on Appraisal Volume." I'm not sure that it really has anything to do with COVID-19, but in that article, there is a graph, and it really paints a fair story for what's happening in the market. It dates back to 2013, and we can see the yellow line, which is rather static. The yellow line represents unique license numbers for appraisers submitting to UCDP. So these are appraisers working in the traditional residential mortgage financial transaction market. In 2016, there are appraisers across the country that heard a lot of noise about an appraiser shortage. And for some of us, we thought, are you kidding me? There's no shortage. I need more work. But it was really related to what we call the cow states. That's Colorado, where Scot's from, Oregon, and Washington. And there was a significant strain on those areas. And that is where we saw impact on turn times and fees and all of this other thing. I mean, Brian, in California, you had several members that moved to Oregon just to take advantage of the situation.
Yeah, I know a few that went straight to Portland because they thought they could make so much more money. And I think he has, so yeah.
That noise subsided in 2018, 2017 and 2018. As you can see, it drops below that threshold. And then in 2019, it picked back up, very similar to 2016, except for it was across the country. And then in 2020, doesn't surprise me when I'm talking to appraisers, specifically, for example, here in Phoenix, where I'm at, where they're saying they're doing 3 times the amount of work that they normally complete. And that's because there's a 53% increase in appraisal volume. And these are just appraisals that are submitted to the UCDP portal. Doesn't account for FHA, doesn't account for waivers, which Scott may talk about. It is strictly appraisals submitted to the portals.
Scott, do you have anything to add here before we move on?
No, I mean, I think it's a telling story. And I think that obviously, you know, it's great when the appraiser profession is busy in some circumstances. But I think another important note to make around when we start to see these capacity challenges are we want the best appraisers to get the work, right? And so when you start to drive into these kind of markets, it starts to spread the work out into thinner and thinner into various groups within our profession. And I think when we start to solve for capacity issues, we're also going to start to bring more volume to our highest quality appraiser professionals out in the marketplace. And I think that's something else important that we should all be thinking about as a profession as it comes to public trust and things of that nature. We know there's varying degrees of quality across our industry, and we want to keep that quality with the best performers.
Great. So seeking solutions. So as John just kind of outlined, obviously this problem's not going anywhere. And you know, the COVID flexibilities that came out this year definitely provided a little bit of relief for the current moment. But it's, you know, we can't look at this and try and find temporary solutions for, you know, something that's not a temporary issue. There's a lot of good and bad options being out there. I think, you know, I'm new to this industry relatively. I started this past summer. So, you know, learning all about AVMs and how sometimes AVMs can be super accurate if they're in, you know, a neighborhood with a boatload of houses that are all very similar. But also AVMs can be super terrible in a lot of other places where there's a lot of degree of variance. And so, you know, these add a lot of risk, and some of them might diminish the role of an appraiser. Some of them might help the role of an appraiser. And I'd love to just kind of have an open conversation about some of the solutions that you've seen brought to market, and maybe some of the best ones that you think might have potential into the future, and maybe some of the worst ones that, you know, you hope are already gone, and if not, hopefully going away very soon.
Yeah, I think also before we jump into that, Nick, kind of coming to mind, I'd love to hear from Craig and Dustin and Brian, you know, from their communities that they talk to lots of appraisers out there, you know, in their roles. And, you know, is that a common perception right now in the appraiser communities that there's a capacity issue, or do most appraisers you're hearing from believe that we're fine and there's really no concern?
No, I think the reality is right now, with interest rates being low, high demand on new loan originations, that there's clearly a need for appraisers to be able to come into the profession. And clearly there have been issues with barriers of entry that have made it difficult for people to find trainees. I was on a call yesterday where a young lady in Texas has been reaching out to every appraisal firm she can find in the Houston area and can't find a single person that will take her on as a mentor supervisor. And so there are issues with that. I think the other thing that we haven't really talked about is that the GSEs are finding solutions to some of these problems by offering appraisal waivers. The reality is that, and as I understand it, and you guys probably know better than I do, but I understand that the waivers constitute over 50% of the being offered over 50% of the loans that are being originated. And if the waivers weren't in place, appraisers would have no capability of meeting the current demand. Does that sound right to you,
100%. Greg, I'll jump in there. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. And I think A lot of it is refinance transactions, which is really where our biggest volume of the transactional work is right now. And so there's a high degree of people who are eligible for waivers because they've had a recent past transaction and they meet the eligibility requirements of the GSEs on a, I'm trying to think of the right way to articulate it. The population of loans that are being refinanced right now have a high degree of eligibility rate to meet those for the refinance transactions. And it might be upwards of, we've heard 55 to 65% of refinance transactions are receiving waivers. So you could imagine the amount of volume. When we saw that last slide that John showed, that was only UCDP submissions. So a significantly more amount of transactions out in the marketplace, we would be in big trouble.
Dustin, I think you were about to jump in.
Well, no, I as I've talked to appraisers across the nation the last couple of months, and by the way, I include myself in this. I've not talked to one who has said that they've been able to keep up with the volume that's coming into their office. And this is not just volume that, that would be the typical throwaway, the ridiculous fees, the ridiculous turn times, the ridiculous companies that they wouldn't normally work for anyway. These are good paying jobs that they would any other time be willing and wanting to accept. In fact, most appraisers I speak to are turning down about 50% of the volume that they would otherwise take. Now, I do want to say one thing on that slide. It can be a bit deceiving, and I know it doesn't include all appraisals out there, but when you look at that slide, it looks like there's an overwhelming lack of capacity when it comes to appraisers. Now, I went to public school, so forgive me if I get my math wrong, but when you take an average of say 500,000 appraisals and you divide that by 40,000 appraisers, and my understanding is this is per month, the number that pops up is 12.5. I think any of us here can handle 12.5 appraisals a month. And I realize that doesn't show the whole picture. That's just a snapshot. But on the other hand, I think reality, on the boots on the ground reality, is that appraisers are feeling pretty overwhelmed and wanting to accomplish more than they can accomplish right now.
And Dustin, that's a great observation. I think what this slide really does share with appraisers is if we felt a capacity issue, even remotely in some areas in 2016, and appraisers in general, as you're pointing out, are saying they have capacity issues today, it's just a good slide to see where were we at that time. And when the noise dissipated, where were we at then, right? And so it's just a helpful slide in that regard.
Well, and if you think about it, if you think of the industry and the stakeholders and the noise that we hear from them, just go back real quick, Nick, to that slide one more time. I just want to point one thing out. I think most of us in 2018, 2019 felt pretty normal, right? We were assigning orders without issue. We were getting really quick turn times, appraisers returning things rapidly, and the market felt pretty normal. So to your point there, Dustin, when the volume falls into that 500K range, it seems pretty tolerable. But we know 2016 had a lot of noise, which is what drove the GSEs and FHFA to start looking for modernization solutions because of the pain we felt in 2016. And then you jump to 2020, and that's when we really started, feeling probably some of the worst. I think most people I've been in the industry for 25 years, talked to a lot of colleagues, and this is probably the worst market that we've seen in terms of being able to procure appraisals, in the history of my career as an appraiser, both in the field as well as a procurer of the services.
Yeah, good points. I agree.
The appraisers that I talked to, including myself, I just looked up on my calendar. I'm booked out 3 weeks, so I think it's roughly 20 days for an inspection time right now. And while that is a lot of job security, and I like that when I do my QuickBooks at the end of the month, when I have to make that phone call to my agent to set that inspection, and I'm already booking well past their 17-day contingencies, that's not good for anybody, especially in today's market. It can be really challenging on appraising houses that they're having to extend contingencies and just the expectation that, oh man, how long is this going to take? I got a call at 7 o'clock this morning from an agent I inspected the house yesterday, and he said, you know, we're supposed to close by the end of the week. And that's probably not going to happen realistically, but he's saying already, hey, when is this appraisal going to be done? So I think that's you know, it is a real issue kind of for the boots on the ground appraisers that you know, they're feeling this pressure.
Yeah, and think of the consumers in that scenario, right? The appraisal is a really stressful component to both sides of the transaction who are looking to acquire that home, and it just adds that, you know, anxiety for longer periods of time as they're waiting to understand where that's going to come in.
Especially today, I think there was one particular house in the Sacramento area that had 120 offers, and it's been all over social media. And that's sort of the environment that we're in. Not specifically in my area, but 9 offers, 10 offers is very common. And if things aren't priced correctly, you know, it just goes crazy. So the appraisal becomes a very, very stressful key part of the whole process.
Yeah, I don't want to digress, but have any of you seen a market like this before in your career, with the purchase market as aggressive as it is right now? I haven't either. Yeah.
I mean, 2009
was
was
one period in Nevada, Las Vegas, where you had waiting lists for people getting into new subdivisions and things like that, coming in around 2006, 2005, 2006. But it was kind of a localized situation. I think the challenge that I was talking with a consultant who's telling me that they're up about 80% on appraisal complaints, where appraisers are coming in below the purchase contract, and the number of complaints that are being filed against appraisers is going up dramatically. And so not only do we have a fairly active demand for appraisals and appraisal services, but they're not easy. You know, you're dealing with situations where the contract price is higher than the list price, and we're dealing, you know, and I always feel like as an appraiser, I'm driving down the road looking in the rear view mirror using historical data, and we worry that if we get too aggressive on market condition adjustments, or we, you know, get too far outside the norms of what we're accustomed to, that we're going to find ourselves on the other side of a complaint, or at least a GSE dissatisfaction or underwriting dissatisfaction, because they don't feel like we've supported things as well as we should. On the other hand, we're feeling the pressure that we know the market is going up, and we don't know how long it's going to continue, and we're concerned about how do we deal with these rapid increases. Is it a bubble? Is it a trend? What is it? And so it creates a degree of concern for the person doing the appraisal when we see some of these things starting to take place.
I think that's a good kind of segue, just knowing that, you know, you're going to have this increase of complaints due to all this strain. So when it comes to some alternative solutions, you know, I think one of the complaints or concerns that I often hear with some of the alternative solutions is if it's, you know, if you're talking about a hybrid program or a hybrid solution that you aren't confident in the data that you're getting, that you're, you know, creating your value on, is that open you up for more risk of complaint? And so I'm wondering, like, from a hybrid solution or from a alternative solution perspective, you know, what type of options are going to actually like make that part better and you know, help to fix the strain, but also not expose you to a bunch more possible complaints? And what ones are kind of the issues that maybe just, you know, it's a Band-Aid, but it's really going to make things worse in the long run, or you're going to expose yourself to more complaints because it might not be as accurate, or things like that.
And to your point, Nick, and I'd love to hear from the three of you as well, who's using the COVID flexibilities, right? That this is something that we didn't anticipate. There was some pushback on just hybrid solutions in general. And then here we are faced March of 2020 with a real hybrid solution offered through the GSEs and appraisal flexibilities. Are all of you participating in the COVID flexibilities? To what extent, and how do you feel about it?
I've never really had a problem with the flexibilities, John, as long as there is sufficient information that I can create a credible report. And that's not just me, touting the company line. This is something we're living each and every day. Now, we don't have as much now, but in the beginning, especially last summer, we probably turned down, I would guess, 30-40% of the COVIDs that came in, just because we didn't feel like it, with the highest and best use questions, with, data available, not available, inability to get that data and feel comfortable where we were. I think that was a big issue and continues to be a big issue. In other words, if I feel that the data is there and it's credible, I have no problem putting my signature on something. But if it's not, I also don't have any problem turning around and walking away.
I've used the COVID flexibilities almost exclusively for the last year. And next Monday, I get my second vaccination, and I'm so excited to actually go back out and go inside houses again. And it really has been a challenge. Like Dustin said, data integrity is really key. And so many times on orders, if I do see a discrepancy in square footage between MLS and a public record, that's probably not something that I feel comfortable and confident in moving forward. So it really does limit, the appraisals that I feel I can complete. But overall, I think it has given. I mean, it really kind of saved my my business, and it gave me a solution to a real problem that I remember when I made the choice to say, call my AMCs and say, hey, take these orders back. I'm not willing to go inside houses anymore. And I sort of thought, what are we going to do? Am I going to be calling John for a reviewer job in 2 weeks? But immediately these flexibilities came out, and I said, all right, let's really develop something. So and I developed a really big questionnaire that I can give out to homeowners so I can feel confident and really getting a good idea. I've done FaceTime, Zoom calls, things like that with borrowers to really walk through the house to sort of figure out, here's what we're doing. And it kind of gave me an insight maybe into the future on exactly how many houses do I have to go inside to feel confident about the value for. Let's think about scope of work. Let's think about appraisals that I do for non-lending situations. That a retrospective appraisal is really me going inside the house. Does that make sense at all? So I really felt the COVID flexibilities were kind of opened my eyes to new business opportunities in the future too.
It's interesting. Craig muted yourself. You muted yourself, my friend.
Let's try. We in our area, I don't know that I've done 10 appraisals that had 10 COVID flexibilities, and mainly because the lenders weren't requesting it, and we've had some people that have been concerned about having us come into their homes, but we've used the appropriate guidelines and taken the appropriate precautions. And all things being equal, I would just as soon be able to observe the condition of the property myself. But I certainly have no objection with using reliable third-party data sources to be able to develop these. In fact, I've got a son who's working in an environment where they have appraiser trainees exclusively going out and collecting the property data and providing that to their supervising appraiser, all in accordance with the client and approval. But it's worked out to be a fairly effective way in being able to solve. In fact, I think their average turn time is 3 days on many of these assignments that they're providing, and it's been a pretty good solution to the problem. I think the area, and sometimes I think as residential appraisers we forget that there is a huge range of valuation requirements or opportunities that are out there. And the requirements for the GSEs, the stuff that's being sold in the secondary markets, is completely different than some of the value solutions we're looking at when they're doing home equity loans or appraisals for non-GSE type environment. And some of the solutions that I see being offered there are the ones that probably raise as much concern as any, because we see some of these desktop opportunities that are being offered where the client is providing all of the relevant property characteristics. I'm filling out an appraisal report online. I can't print out a copy of my work product very effectively. And in some cases, the client is suggesting the comparable sales that I should be using will autofill that data into the form. And while, gee, it's a pretty simple, easy thing to go do, I have concerns about how do I meet the file management requirements in USPAP? Where's my signed certification that I have to have access to? And have I actually vetted the information? The thing that we find over time is that increasing markets hide a lot of sins, but when the market slows down is when we will see how bad some of the work that's been being produced really is. And I think, you know, now is the time that we are absolutely vigilant in making sure that we're following appropriate standards, that we're doing everything appropriate, because this current environment will change at some point. And we certainly don't want to have work product out there that's going to give us grief down the road.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the important, my perspective when I hear you talk about that, Craig, is the importance of appraisers to select the solutions that they're willing to do. They really hold the keys to the marketplace and what's you know, being produced in terms of their comfort level. And appraisers should demand you know, that they're getting the products and you know, the solutions that meet their expectations in terms of their professional obligations. They should require what those obligations are, not the marketplace itself.
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I think the one thing that, Craig, you said a lot, and I heard from Dustin and Brian as well, is just the reliability. It's like, just to make sure, like that is what feels like the most important detail. When you can go and inspect a property yourself, you know it's reliable because you're the one doing it. So when you're getting that data and you're not the one that's on site, the most important thing is that you have reliable data that's, you know, trustworthy and also comprehensive, that, you know, gives you everything that you need to make the decisions you need to make, not just the borrower or the seller's, you know, opinion on what photos are most important or what details are most important. You want to be able to do that. Yeah, I think, and then, you know, to that point, and to kind of lead into what Scott said, you know, until we can have a solution that can address that and can give you the data and the insights that are thorough and reliable, we're not going to have a solution that's going to work, because having appraiser buy-in and appraiser kind of confidence in the solution is really the only way to roll anything out. You know, we need the entire community to be on board with something, you know, and know that it's going to be something that's going to help us and move us forward. Otherwise, we're going to keep hitting roadblocks.
Dick, one of the words that comes to mind is trust. Do our clients trust the appraiser to determine the scope of work, to make sure that that data is credible? And I'll be honest with you, I'm concerned about that, because we've moved into a world where trust is not really a thing anymore. Meaning, in the old days, the appraiser was given the assignment and the appraiser made the decision as to what extent they would need to follow through to get the data, to get the information that's needed to produce a credible report. You know, making decisions such as, is it really necessary for me to drive comps for this particular assignment? Is it necessary for me to have boots on the living room floor on this particular assignment? I've got 2 trainees right now who are very competent when it comes to appraisal data collection, on-site inspections, if you will. I have very few clients that allow that, which is strange to me, because USPAP allows it, the GSEs allow it. Both of those entities, well, if you want to call USPAP an entity, but both of those pathways say we trust the appraiser to get the information that the appraiser needs to produce a credible report. And yet clients are saying, we don't have enough appraisers, appraisals are too slow, we're going to go to waivers. And yet a great, not solution, but at least help to the problem would be, let's trust the appraiser that that data collection can be in there. Remember, I'm the one signing the report. I'm the one with the liability. And if I trust Dallin, my trainee, to go out and gather information, and I've trained him and I've stood by him for 100+ inspections, and I know I can trust his data, I mean, that would go a long way to help speed the process and make sure that these appraisals are credible.
And why
Yeah.
would someone trust the AVS, or sorry, trust the waiver, but not trust
Right.
This is an important conversation, and this is where I touched on it briefly earlier in the conversation around bringing the quality, pushing the work volume into the highest quality appraisers like Dustin and Brian and Craig, right? These are the appraisers that we all trust. That's why they're on this discussion right now, and they've earned that reputation. I think the challenge is us building that trust in the marketplace itself. I sat on a panel the end of 2019 in Los Angeles, and there were two folks from rating agencies and one institutional investor that was on that panel. And it was a non-QM conference, and 100% of those appraisals and non-QM get some sort of a secondary review done on them in order for the rating agencies to provide a certain rating type on those pools of loans, which is how they sell them in the secondary market for a premium and can earn money. But there's a lot of cost associated with that due diligence. And so I asked them, I said, do you guys still really not trust the appraiser after the crisis, after all the appraiser independence, after all the changes in the system to try to ensure that we're not getting, appraisals to predetermined values? Do you still really not trust 100% of the population? And their answer to me was, yes, we do not trust. And so building that trust back up in the folks who depend on collateral risk is something that takes time after, what we went through in the previous, which we all know appraisers had a big part in that. And way we can do that, I believe, and I'll jump into the technology and something I feel really passionate about and something we've been working on for the last 2 years. And look, I believe in the hybrid process. I think the hybrid process offers a lot of opportunity, and I'd love to hear the criticisms to this from others on the call, if there are any. But it builds more appraiser independence when you can completely eliminate the appraiser from engaging with anybody who's a party to that transaction. Brian mentioned the survey that he sends out to his homeowners to use in the COVID product. Maybe that's a survey or some sort of a standard that could be set. Information's gathered from the homeowner independently and then passed back through to the appraiser along with the property data. And now the appraiser is no longer engaging with listing agents and other folks. Now, I know there are some ways that can be important, but you could talk to other agents in the market area to understand what's going on in that marketplace around properties and things of that nature. There's an opportunity to help protect appraisers and the marketplace and trust and perception by going down that independence route. Now, I will say also with the trainees, these same technologies can be deployed to help scale the trainee programs. And I believe strongly in that as well. And I think that's something that we should all be doing, and we should all be trying to drive our clients and our colleagues to support in ways that we can bring more talent and fresh talent into this profession. And we can build trust by using technology that completely shows that property, complete virtual renditions, machine generated floor plans and GLA, a lot more consistent and authenticated source data. I hear a lot of my colleagues in the secondary markets who deal with collateral risk. They love that concept of getting authenticated source data from the property that can't be manipulated. You can't take a picture in this direction and not show what's in that direction. And, I spent 6 years on the board of real estate appraisers in Colorado. And that's oftentimes what happened when appraisers got themselves in trouble. They just chose to ignore a certain aspect of the property because they didn't want to deal with it. They didn't know how to deal with it. They didn't feel like they were getting paid enough to deal with it. So they just ignored it and they didn't show it. And that came back to bite them. And so when we can show complete transparency about a property, it also forces appraisers to have to deal with those issues when the data is being provided to them, instead of them being the data collector out in the field themselves. They're not in control of that data collection. Here's the data. I want you to analyze it, assess it, and tell me what this property is worth. So I'll pause there. I said a lot, and I'm sure there'll be little pieces in there that some folks can dig into, which I'm kind of trying to bring on here a little bit in the discussion. So
Scott, here's the challenge that we have is that there is some awesome technology out there. I've got a free 360-degree camera, which is the neatest thing because I can take a picture in every room and have a 360-degree view of that property, which I know you guys have better technology than that in terms of being able to get a complete rendition. I think a lot of appraisers are concerned, though, when we talk about the bifurcated process and we start having some of your competitors coming in and saying, okay, we are going to provide you with the relevant property characteristics from an unknown data collection provider with an unknown relationship with the property owner. And we are aware of situations where the listing agent is collecting the property data and providing that to the appraiser. And the question now that me as an appraiser, I have to determine is how reliable is that data if I'm getting it from a real estate agent who in almost every circumstance will not measure the property. In fact, most agents are trained not to measure the property for liability reasons. And I don't know the competency level of where this person, of the person collecting the data. We're aware of situations where you've got Uber drivers going in and collecting property data for some appraisals in some states. And so I think, as you had mentioned, this idea of trust is paramount because there's been a lot of solutions that have been floated out there that don't promote trust. And for me as an appraiser, I have to have a reason to believe that the information that I have been provided is reliable and accurate, or I really can't use it. And unfortunately, as appraisers, we have not done a good job of doing what we're supposed to in terms of determining what the scope of work really needs to be to solve the value problem. And when the client is providing me with the data and I don't have a confidence level in that data, it puts the appraiser in a really tough situation. And so I think there's some really good solutions to some of the problems, but there's not very many people that are promoting those solutions. And so unfortunately, we get people that I fear are going to find themselves in difficult circumstances because they've used information that's not reliable.
I get the feeling that Craig is against the Uber drivers. What's wrong with you, Craig? What about Lyft drivers? Is that better?
I'm gonna say one thing to Craig. You couldn't have said it better. I think that's extremely important. And if we look at some of the solutions being provided out there, that's exactly that. Are they going for the cheap and fast and the not high quality solution to provide the appraisers what they deserve? Are we training $14, $15 an hour, folks to go out and try to learn how to measure and go through a Q&A list of what's important and not important to valuation and try to provide that to an appraiser and have the appraiser expect that individual has captured everything about that property that's important to your assessment? I don't think so. I really don't. And so, again, to talk about Class's solution and is that we believed in investing in very complex, sophisticated technology. It's not cheap. It's actually really expensive. However, it provides the appraiser 100% certainty that they're able to see that whole property. They're not dependent on still images. They have a complete virtual rendition of the home from inside and outside of that property to go through and look at. They can assess what's important and what's not important. And the data that's extracted using the same technologies that drive, self-driving vehicles or computer driving vehicles is what's applied through computer vision to gather and extract that data in ways that's more accurate than what appraisers can measure in the field today. Even John Dingeman himself, who's a lot of us know, he likes to tout his measuring capabilities. And this is even getting to a more granular level than what any human can do in the field with detailed floor plans and understanding of the functional utility of the home, not only 2-dimensional, but 3-dimensional measurements to understand quality and things of that nature, open 2-story ceilings, window measurements. So, if you have floor to ceiling windows, capturing spatial context of where views are visible from still, so the appraisers know and understand these attributes of value. This is what appraisers should demand, and from my perspective, in order to support these types of processes, is that they're being delivered the amount of data they need to not have to visit that home. And the technologies exist, not just class. There's a ton of tech out there that can drive this type of solution, and it's just proliferating rapidly right now, especially with LiDAR coming out in handheld devices now, like the iPhone 12 and some of the iPads and things of that. We're probably going to see that start to happen through majority of devices over the next 2 years. And so it just opens up the opportunity to apply these technologies to the process, and they can be deployed with trainees, or deployed with trainees, or with the hybrid process to continue to advance our profession into the future. And it gives all those downstream stakeholders I was telling you about even more confidence in the system in terms of what's being delivered to them. And it stops the bad acting appraisers out there, and it forces them to address these issues as well, so that we get less black eyes from those that maybe aren't as professional as the ones on this call today.
And Scott, another question that I had, kind of thinking through that, so first of all, one answer that you just spoke to is just the thoroughness and accuracy and the confidence in the technology to be able to collect that. But one of the things Craig said too is about the scope of work, and I'm curious, what you would respond, to the idea of the scope of work being, we have the person or the individual who's being paid to go out and collect that data and provide that thorough response data. We can talk about how perfect it is, but in the case that it isn't perfect, in the case that a bad scan gets sent to somebody, could an appraiser feel confident in knowing that that's not their problem, essentially, right? Like if their valuation is a little bit off, but it's off because of the scan, like how does the scope of work line up as far as the responsibilities of the appraiser who's providing the value and the person who's collecting the data?
Well, this responsibility lies on the appraiser, 100%. They have to be the ones to determine if that data is credible enough for them to generate a value. And that's the value of a scan, is that scans don't work if you can't make a mistake with a scan because the computer can't stitch everything together. So it comes out before it's ever even delivered to the appraiser. The scans go through a process to ensure that everything was taken appropriately. And the way that they work is there's sometimes up to 192 images per rotation. Those all get stitched together, and if they don't align perfectly, you're not able to generate that rendition or able to extract all the data and information that we get out of that. So there's tons of fraud prevention used in the scanning technology as well to ensure that all spaces are captured. 100%. We see where void spaces are, where conduit runs up through a home, let alone a whole room being missed. So the appraisers can have certainty that that data is being provided to them is accurate and not manipulated. It's unmanipulable. And so I think that's a very important point, that the appraisers can rely upon the data being provided to them. And one other point I'll make, and I'll be quiet and let everyone talk for a moment, is that it shouldn't matter who's behind the camera when you have the right technologies deployed to bring that trust to the appraiser. And that's important. You shouldn't have to worry about the training of those individuals or the quality of the individuals that those folks are bringing on that are providing you that data and information. You should be relying upon the technology that was deployed, that you can count on all the data and information you need to see about that home exists.
And Nick, just to close that point on the scope of work and to follow up with what Scott just said, so it is the appraiser's responsibility, and we've seen that over the course of the year with COVID-19 flexibilities, right? I think Craig, Brian, probably you more than anybody, if you're doing it 100%, is sure the scope of work is stated there for you. It's hard printed, it's pre-printed, whatever you want to call it, right? And it is a negotiation, but the negotiation is, Dustin, I think you said it to start, I can't complete the assignment based on the scope of work that's prescribed here, right? So I don't have confidence in this. Whether it's COVID flexibilities, I don't know what the homeowner is sending me. It doesn't look like their house, right? So I'm not willing to proceed with this assignment. The same can be said about technology, right? I'm not comfortable with this technology or this data collector, but I am comfortable with this other technology. I think appraisers need to go seek out the best solutions that meet their needs and allow them to comply with the scope of work rule.
That always needs to be a welcome and encouraged option, is just like with the COVID technologies. If you ever run into conflicting information, or you did an exterior on the property and it looks like a dump, but you get interior photos and it's beautiful, that's going to raise some red flags, and that needs to always be an option to say, hey, stop everything here. I can't rely on this information, and I think like we've all said, trust is absolutely key.
So that brings us to, here's a detailed floor plan, and Scott called me out. I'm just gonna say, I know that this is the company I work for. I am an appraiser, true and blue. My daughter is a new trainee, so I'm actually helping her with inspections. I'm helping her with reports. I'm helping her pull comps. She wants to feel the utmost confident in the sales that she's pulling before she presents it to her supervisory appraiser, which I'm one of, but I'm not her primary.
Wait a second, John. You had to pull out the clipboard and pen?
I don't use a clipboard and pen. and she's smart as a whip. I got to tell you, the younger kids, she's 25. The feedback I've gotten from the folks at DataMaster and GandySoft, et cetera, is like, holy cow, how long has she been appraising? I'm like, 4 weeks, 4 weeks she's been working with a supervisor. So Scott brought it up. I am a home measurement specialist. Those, you guys all know that. I teach a measurement course to learn how to measure per ANSI and AMS. And Scott and the rest of the leadership at class, to their credit, they've allowed me to challenge every step of the way for the last almost 2.5 years, I guess. And I'm like the biggest skeptic, right? So Scott will tell you, I'm not joking either. I told him 2 years ago, this is not the solution. We're not going to use these cameras that somehow measure the house. I know how to teach measurements. Let me tour the country. I'll do it. And of course, Scott said, look, Dingeman, I appreciate that feedback. I just want your feedback on the technology right now. Can you try it out and let me know what you think? And then I get these kind of floor plans back. Like, I mean, I figure I'm good. I include the entry doors, and I include, I don't know, the room labels and the stairs. I mean, I know the stairs are not, scaled or anything, but I include them so you at least know how you get from one floor to the next. But every window, every door, every interior wall, exterior dimensions to know how it was measured per GLA, interior room dimensions so we understand the functional utility or value of those rooms, right? A 6-bedroom home, 9x9 bedrooms seems, I don't know, maybe not as great as a 5-bedroom home with 10x12s, right? And then of course the functional utility. I think of myself as a reviewer, and some of the things that I find out from appraisers where it's determined that they are counting a bedroom, but it's really a sitting room. Well, how would you know that as a reviewer or somebody downstream using data from a property data collector if all they gave you was a sketch with some labels? But if you can see how you access each room through the doors and the walls, et cetera, it's really remarkable. And then, sad to say, it's within 3 to 12 square feet of my GLA measurements every single time. I mean, that's just remarkable. And it saddens me a little bit, but it also gets me super excited. So when my daughter's talking about all the things that she wants to learn, and she certainly wants to measure, although in our qualifying education, we're not taught to measure. So I don't know how this became our responsibility in the first place. But nonetheless, she wants to learn how to measure, but more importantly, she's so interested in the technology. And she says, Dad, this camera, she's on the professional scanner network for us, which we can talk about. But she says, Dad, on my traditional work, Can't I just use this technology? Why do I have to run around with a laser and a clipboard? I don't need a clipboard and I don't need an iPad. I can just run around with my camera. And then I have data to go forever into time and recall the inspection of that property.
No more dark photos, blurred photos, or missing photos. You have it all right at your fingertips when you've been at the property.
So we only have about 5 or so minutes left here, I think. So first of all, we'd love to, sit down with you all and go through some demos of this, of our tools and kind of more details of how it works and all of that. So definitely, I know Jameis is on the call. If you want to reach out to either him or myself, we can connect the dots and get you guys set up on a demo call soon. One question I want to make sure to ask. Actually, we just got a question from Stephanie. It said, would this be acceptable? I don't see exterior dimensions.
The example that's on the screen, you are correct. There's no exterior dimensions on this one, but they do generate exterior dimensions as well as a dimension list.
Sorry, Stephen, not Stephanie. I apologize, Steve. Also, another question going back to kind of setting up for demos that came from Joe from beforehand. We're talking about pilot programs in a few different regions around the country. But for appraisers who are in locations that, maybe some of these pilot programs or new things aren't available yet, what are the best ways for people to get involved and to stay in the know and, start being able to take advantage of this stuff as soon as it's available?
Yeah, I mean, I would reach out to Jameis and team. We're going to be expanding into different areas, so it's great to put yourself out there and let the team know that that's something you're interested in participating in, so that they have you queued up on the panel when we go into your market area. We're also happy to talk to you about how you can use it within your own practice without any pilot being necessary at all. And so, reach out to Jameis and team, and we'll help you get set up and learn how you can start to deploy this within your own practice.
I'm ready for you to sign me up on that. I think one of the things that as appraisers, as we look to the future, that there's a couple of things that we have to do. And one is the embracing of technology. The other is learning how to better analyze the data that we get and put it into some kind of a meaningful conclusion. I think one of the challenges we find is that we are so accustomed to doing everything ourselves that we are not as good at leveraging our professional capabilities. And, in my office, we've got 8 appraisers. I've got a 2-to-1, one staff person for 2 appraisers who help streamline that process. And I think the more that we can leverage our professional skills, learn how to use some of these technologies, and then learn how to do a better job of analyzing. One of the things that drives me nuts is to see the inconsistent ways that we develop quality and condition ratings and some of those kinds of things, and then it ends up in poor results. So I maybe have good information about my subject property, but I do a poor job of making the relative comparison analysis between the sales, and at that point, we've just compromised our ability to provide the kind of reliable results that we really need to do.
I completely agree with that. And Nick, maybe we can, I want to be respectful of the panelists, so if people have to drop at the top of the hour, by all means. I know we started a few minutes late. Maybe we can run just a few minutes over. But I think Craig touched on some great points there. And I know that the panelists we have on the call today, Dustin's out there all the time trying to help appraisers understand how to scale their business. And they use technologies in their business so that they're focused on the most important part of where their skill set lies. There's tools to import data from your MLS platform itself. You don't have to have that data pushed to you from someone else. You can create mappings and bring data into your form, so you're not rekeying and typing that information. You can have your assistants help pull that data into the form, so then when you're going through and just reviewing it and understanding, you're selecting the comps, you're doing your final reconciliation of value, your paired sales analysis, the things that appraisers should be focusing their time on. I don't know if they want to share any tidbits here, but I think that's the important part. Apply technology to your practice to scale your business. And at class, that's something that we want to be able to help you do with our technology as well. This is new. We're still, we're rolling it out, right? It's fresh. We're still learning and improving the solution, but we have built our solution around the appraiser so that it can continue, by pulling data into the 4 major forms where providers, trying to do everything we can to help you be more efficient and use this in a way that an appraiser would want to use it. But, the rest of the panelists, I don't know if you guys want to jump in a little bit with, how you've done that over the years to create such successful businesses. You don't type your reports probably.
Scott, one of the analogies that I often use with my clients is the doctor's office analogy, and understanding that we as appraisers are professionals, just like the doctor is the professional in the doctor's office. He would never insist, I shouldn't say he or she would never insist that they have to be the one to take your weight and to draw your blood and to take your blood pressure. Although those are critical things for that doctor to make prognosis and to do the job that the doctor is intended to do. If we as appraisers look at this change, I've seen appraisers say, well, I've got to be that guy in the house. I've got to be the one pulling the tape. I just can't trust that data from anywhere. Well, if a doctor insisted on doing all of that data collection herself, she wouldn't get much done, and she wouldn't be able to focus on the quality of the job that she does, meaning being a doctor and focusing on what's important in that whole process. And we as appraisers, if we can help ourselves understand that, and that, yes, the credibility of the data is keen, and we need to have that credibility. We've got to trust the data that comes in, but it doesn't mean that we have to gather it ourselves. It doesn't mean that we have to have, a trainee necessarily do it. But that technology, this change that we're experiencing as we learn to allow ourselves to look at it and practice it and understand it and finally trust it, that will change the way that we do business, meaning we can be focused on what we need to be focused on, which is being the valuation professional.
And it's interesting you say that, Dustin, because sometimes I'm just talking, I'm not really listening to myself, so to speak, but I was privileged to speak before the South Carolina Professional Appraisers Coalition last week. And I'm making this presentation and sharing the technology. And some of the appraisers there were very fearful of the change and what does this mean for my future? And do I see a future for appraising? And I said, that's a great question. I said, I love the profession and I absolutely see a future. And to just state how much I believe that we have a future, I didn't talk my daughter out of becoming an appraiser.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think my favorite analogy that I've heard when anybody talks about this being step one of eliminating the appraiser from the system or whatever is dentists and dental hygienists, and the idea that it's the exact same thing. Dentists aren't going to dental school for all of those years to learn how to floss somebody's teeth. And when dental hygienists became a thing, that didn't mean the end of dentists. And it didn't mean that dentists started making less money either. If anything, dentists started making way more money because they all scaled their business, hired, 3 to 5 dental hygienists, and now can see, 5 times as many clients as they were able to before, because now they're just coming in and getting paid a bunch to look in your mouth for 4 seconds instead of actually doing all the the other stuff, which is a separate debate. But same type of concept. Like this is in so many industries. Like it's everywhere where people scale their business. You get your expertise to do one thing, so hire people who can do the the rekeying and the measuring and all of those different details that you can just supervise and know are done correctly.
I think a lot of times we get so caught into a rut of doing a certain type of work that we forget that there is such a broad range of services that we can provide. We have a unique skill set. We can provide far more than we do in terms of helping real estate agents in developing appropriate listing prices, in being able to provide litigation services. I've got a couple of contracts with the Department of Transportation, and it's a sweet deal because it's just an hourly rate And when they call, I'm thrilled. And let's take our time. You know, we want to, but the reality is there's lots of things that we can do. And but it requires us to improve our skill set. The tools that we can provide need to be better than what we can get with some of these technology solutions. And so let's let the technology do what the technology does. And then let's learn how to leverage the technology so that we can then provide something that the technology can't do. And that's professional opinions based on the application of the technology. And I think that there's all kinds of things we can do if we broaden our horizons and start looking at ways to use the skill set that we have.
A couple other questions just came through. One, not a question, but from Angelo. So the future of appraisal/valuation industry lies in the intersection of advanced computational power, big data and machine learning, and domain expertise, the appraiser. 100% agree with that. I think that's a very, very good statement. It's not about one or the other. It's about using those two things purposefully together. Mark Gerber just asked, will class talk to the lenders to allow us to start using trainees for inspections without the supervisor going to the property?
Yep. And as a matter of fact, we have many lenders that allow it today. So we're trying to work. We're going to be doing a lot more with trainees here throughout the rest of this year. That's a big focus of class, and we're going to try to help to continue to proliferate, bringing more trainees into the profession. It's another one. Go ahead and reach out to Jameis and team, and we can circle back and try to find some ways to get trainee work coming your direction.
Jameis did, if anybody didn't see it, Jameis did put his email address in the chat box as well. That would be jpurtill@classvaluation.com.
And I think we have an information email as well, Jameis. I don't know if someone can throw that in the innovation information email in there as well.
Yep. I think that's Yep, there it is. Innovationscs@classvaluation.com, also in the chat function. Thanks, Jameis.
No problem. And just as far as the demos go, guys, we're trying to do about 2 of those a week where John Dingeman and myself jump on and demonstrate the technology, talk about the scanning network. So if you don't get an invite right away for this next coming week, we're doing 2 every week for as far out as I can think of until we demo the whole panel on the class side. So there'll be plenty of opportunities to meet with us.
Cool. Well, thanks again, everybody, for all our panelists and all of our attendees for your time today. Like I said, I'm recording this, so we'll get this all sent out in the next Appraiser monthly newsletter for everybody. Before we hang up, any last minute questions or comments before we close out?
Nick, if I could just jump in, I know we didn't have an opportunity to really look at the technology in depth. I had an opportunity to sit down a few weeks ago with you guys and go through this. I have to admit, I was impressed. We went through a house that had been done where I was virtually able to walk around the exterior of the home. I was able to virtually walk through each of the rooms on the inside, including some dark areas that I don't know that my camera would have picked up, as well as the technology that you were using. There was one time when I asked if we scanned and kind of looked, I said, can we see the ceiling? And we scanned up and saw the ceiling. And I said, well, is that mold in the corner? And we zoomed in and no, it was just a shadow. I mean, it was amazing. I couldn't smell the cat pee, but other than that, it was pretty cool.
That's the advantage.
Thanks,
I
Dustin.
think. I've been in a few of these places where I just as soon not smell the stuff.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that I really appreciate that, Dustin. I think that's really important to us, at least. Well, I believe strongly in the technology that puts that at your fingertips and not leading us to trust video or still images. I think that's the important part. We can ensure that you can see the whole space with these tools, and you can control where you go to see it virtually. It's a complete virtual environment, and it's really a virtual reality. It's using virtual reality to inspect properties. And so thank you for sharing that, Dustin. Appreciate that.
Yeah, we hope to get a little bit into some of the demo today, but obviously great conversation. Wanted to keep it on that too. So demos available for everybody. Reach out to Jameis and we can take through. We have the shadow, not mold scan that Dustin was talking about. So we can take you through that same one to kind of look into that detail. So Cool.
And don't worry, Dustin, we train the scanners to keep an eye out and a nose out for smells and sounds. And they can also smart tag that and label that for the appraiser as well to relay that information. So while you don't have to experience it yourself, you will still be in the know and know that it exists.
Again, and appraiser feedback is so important from the folks that are using the technology and completing the digital inspections, virtual inspections. Because it's your feedback, since we own the technology, if you will, then, you know, it's that feedback that helps us better the process for you.
I'll echo Dustin too. When I saw the demo, I was really impressed with the level of detail down to the serial number, the year the appliances were installed, that sort of thing, and to develop, you know, even a mathematical formula to find out effective age. Whereas today I might be like, well, it's 39 years old and a couple of things have been redone. My effective age is at 30 years, something like that. You know, if we can figure out a mathematical formula that says, oh, look at how many components, a percentage of the house that has been upgraded, remodeled, that sort of thing. And one of the points that you had on PowerPoint was to eliminate bias. And bias is going to be such a huge topic in the appraisal industry going forward. Anything that we can do to eliminate that bias is going to be beneficial to appraisers. And I think that all, you know, whether you're calculating adjustments and value or inspecting the property, anything that can be data driven and backed up by data is what's key. So I think this technology is part of that.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Brian.
Cool. All right.
Great. Well, we look forward to some more dialogue with you guys. We'll get more of this out there. We'll have you guys using it, and then we'll circle back and have some more conversations.
Very much appreciated. Thank you all.
Thanks, you guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Be
Take
safe,
care.
everybody.
Thanks.